Page 49 continued. Question 40. Analyze and comment on the Lady Macduff and her son scene. Act 4, Scene 2. Answer. Lady Macduff and her son are engaged in conversation with Ross about Macduff's flight to England. The very mention of the mother and the son introduces a new note to the play and suggests a soothing domesticity which offers a contrast to the fierce sins and terrible sufferings of Macbeth. Lady Macduff accuses Macduff of lack of family affection. She attributes her husband's flight to fear. According to her interpretation, his flight will signify to Macbeth an act of treachery. Ross justifies Macduff's action by suggesting public reasons for his flight. Lady Macduff thinks of her home and her children's safety. Page 50. Quote, "He loves us not. He wants the natural touch." Unquote. Even the poor wren tries to defend her young ones against the owl, but Macduff has left his family to the wolves. So it is fear that made him fly, fear for his own safety, neither love nor wisdom. His flight runs against all reason. Ross tries to soothe the agitated feelings and excited mind of Lady Macduff. He asks her to control herself. Macduff is noble, wise, and judicious, so he is the last person to act without wisdom. They are passing through critical times, and that explains the strange conduct of Macduff. Lady Macduff is so perturbed and irritated by the husband's conduct that she says to her son that his father is dead. How he will live. The child gives a clever retort. He will do as the birds do. Birds live upon what they pick up, and so he will. Poor birds are not set for. They are not worth a catch. He does not believe that his father is dead. When his mother says that his father is dead and what will he do without a father, he asks his mother how she will manage without a husband. The mother replies that she can buy 20 husbands at any market. The child takes her up sharply, saying she will buy one at a time and sell him for another. To the son's question, "Who is a traitor?" the mother replies that everyone who is false to his oath is a traitor and must be hanged. The son asks, "Who will hang the traitor?" Lady Macduff answers that honest men will do it. Her son replies that those who swear falsely must be fools, for they are surely sufficiently large in numbers to defeat hang the honest people. The honest people. The mother appreciates the clever reply of the son, but asks him if that will help him to get a father. The son replies that if his father were dead, she would have wept for him. And if she does not weep, that is a sign that he will get a new father. Lady Macduff is delighted at the clever talk of her son. A messenger enters and announces some danger for Lady Macduff and her son. He asks them to fly away from the place. Lady Macduff cannot understand where she would escape. The murderers enter and want to know the whereabouts of her husband. They accuse him of faithlessness to his oath of loyalty. The little child makes a prompt and emphatic protest, calling the accusation a lie and describing them as shag-haired villains. The murderers stab the child and pursue Lady Macduff, who runs away. Quote, "This scene, dreadful as it is still a relief because of variety, because domestic and therefore soothing, as associated with the only real pleasure in life." Unquote. This is by Coleridge. The scene commingles pathos and humor. The introduction of pathos at this point illustrates the usual Shakespearean method of emphasizing by contrast the awful nature of the impending disaster. Bradley points out that the chief function of the scene is, quote, to touch the heart with beauty and pathos, to open this spring of love and tears, unquote. Knight sees much more than mere pathos in the death of Macduff's son. Quote, the violation of the natural order is completed by murder, unquote. The purposeless slaughter of Macduff's family shows a further deterioration in Macbeth's character and makes, quote, the day of reckoning more certain, unquote. It gives a stronger motive to Macduff for playing the role of avenger. The scene illustrates Shakespeare's characteristic way of sustaining our interest in that part of the play which is liable to flag. Bradley remarks, quote, in this section of a tragedy, Shakespeare often appeals to an emotion different from any of those excited in the first half of the play, and so provides novelty and generally also relief. As a rule, this new emotion is pathetic, and the pathos is not terrible as lacerating, but even painful, is accompanied by the sense of beauty and by an outflow of admiration or affection, which come with an inexpressible sweetness after the tension of the crisis and the first counterstroke, unquote. Page 51. The scene throws light on the characters of Lady Macduff and her son. Lady Macduff is a simple but devoted wife and mother with never a thought beyond her home. She cannot excuse her husband because the security of her home and the safety of her children's life are in jeopardy. Quote, his flight was madness, unquote. She is wounded by her husband's cruel neglect. The way she reproaches her husband, however, is itself the proof of her devotion to him. But her nobility and heroism are revealed in her reply to the murderer's question. Where is your husband? She says, quote, I hope in no place so unsanctified where such as thou mayest find him, unquote. This is the challenging answer of the heroic lady. The little Macduff is indeed a great creation. He is pleasantly saucy and amusingly precocious. His replies are smart and clever. His mother cannot cope with his nimble wit. He is at the same time affectionate, frank, brave, and high-spirited. He is not scared by the faces of the murderers. He bursts out in emphatic protest when they call his father a traitor. He is indeed a chip of the old block. When he is stabbed, he thinks of his mother and asks her to fly away. Question 41. Analyze and comment on the cauldron scene in Macbeth. Answer. Act 4, Scene 1 is the cauldron scene. Cauldron. As hinted in the fourth scene of the third act, Macbeth meets the witches the morning after the banquet. He wants to consult the witches again. The witches are engaged in their ghostly incantations, authorized and presided over by Hecate. Macbeth must know, quote, by the worst means the worst, unquote. He puts his questions. The witches give him the option of hearing either from themselves or from their masters. Macbeth chose the latter. 3 apparitions appear. An armed head warning him against Macduff, a bloody child exhorting him to be, quote, bloody, bold and resolute, unquote, and promising him safety from man, declaring that, quote, none of woman born shall harm, unquote, him, and a child crowned with a tree in his hand, assuring him that he, quote, shall never be vanquished until great Burnham Wood to high Dunsinane Hill shall come against him. Unquote. Thus do the witches lie like truth, beguile him with false hopes, and deepen in him that sense of security which is mortal's chiefest enemy. But Macbeth has one more question to ask. Quote, shall Banquo's issue ever reign in this kingdom? Unquote. The answer comes in the shape of a sign of 8 Stuart kings followed by Banquo's ghost, and with this the witches vanish. This is the last scene between Macbeth and the Weird sisters. The last of the witch scenes marks the definite beginning of the reaction. We have our last glimpse of a witch's sabbath and a full view of a witch ritual. If the rites are unclean and the ingredients loathsome, that is because the witches are witches. The witches by their prophecies lull Macbeth into a false sense of security. He becomes more desperate and proceeds headlong to his disaster. The first action that he is prompted to do is the slaughter of the Macduff family. Question 42. What dramatic purpose is served by the encounter between Malcolm and Macduff, Act 4, Scene 3? Answer with close reference to the text of Macbeth. CU Honours Paper 1997. Answer. Macduff has arrived in England, and in this scene we have an interview between him and Malcolm, Duncan's eldest son. Malcolm is at first suspicious and does not trust Macduff. He wants to be satisfied that Macduff is not enemy's spy. He wants to test the sincerity of Macduff's patriotism and loyalty to the throne. He attributes all kinds of vices to himself, lechery, greed, and cruelties. He tells Macduff that he has no, quote, king-becoming graces, unquote. At this, Macduff feels despondent and completely frustrated. He makes an outburst of his passionate grief. Page 52. Macduff's holy anger disarms all suspicions and withdraws all his allegations against himself and, quote, places himself unreservedly in Macduff's hands for his country's service, unquote. This happy hour is further enhanced by the news that old Siward, Siward, with 10,000 English soldiers, was already setting forth for Scotland. This leads to the contrast between England's holy king with his power of healing and the tyrant of Scotland with his misrule and outrages. When public affairs for Scotland seem propitious, there comes a private grievance for a man who is to play a leading role in public life. Ross comes and after initial hesitations breaks the news of the slaughter of the Macduff family by the tyrant. Macduff, who is to play the key role in the retribution, is inspired by personal motive for revenge. Macduff becomes, quote, the agent not only of the grand nemesis which constitutes the whole plot, but also a nemesis upon a private wrong which occupies the latter half of the play, unquote. Shakespeare is very much indebted to Holinshed for his material which is taken from his chronicle. The first portion is practically a paraphrase of the chronicle. Chambers regards the scene as tedious. The first portion is practically a paraphrase of the chronicle. Chambers regards it as tedious. The dialogue between Malcolm and Macduff is, to many tastes, dull, but it is wearisome on the stage. Quote, on the stage, the whole scene can be made highly effective, unquote. The scene is dramatically important as a choric commentary. The evil that Macbeth has caused is explicitly stated, and it is stated impersonally. Malcolm's suspicion and the long testing of Macduff emphasize the mistrust which has spread from the central evil of the play. The scene marks the progress of the plot to catastrophe. The help of English soldiers is assured. Malcolm is prepared to take the leadership, and Macduff, the main agent of retribution, is further fortified by a stronger motive for revenge. The reference to English kings' divine power highlights Shakespeare's ideal of kingship. Malcolm is seen as cautious, suspicious, and calculating. At the same time, he is noble and honest, and is fired by the resolve to restore Scotland to her former order and prosperity. Thus, political stability, disturbed by Macbeth's crime and misrule, is to be restored, and there is the suggestion of rejuvenation of moral order. More general questions. Question 43. Write a note on the poetry of the play Macbeth. Answer. In a masterly analysis of the play, L.C. Knights, in his essay How Many Children Had Lady Macbeth, interprets Macbeth as a dramatic poem. He says, Macbeth has greater affinity to the wasteland than with the doll's house. According to him, in poetry, apprehension of the whole can be obtained from a lively attention to the parts. In Macbeth, themes of the reversal of values and of unnatural disorder and deceitful appearance are blended in the play, and they can be better understood by the images, words, descriptions, and expressions of the play. As for example, he reads meanings in the expression, quote, when the battle's lost and won, unquote. It suggests the kind of metaphysical pitch and toss that is about to be played with good and evil. The description, quote, doubtful is stood, next line, as two spent swimmers that do cling together, next line, and choke their art, unquote, applies not only to the battle but to the ambiguity of Macbeth's future fortunes. The impression conveyed is not only one of violence, but of unnatural violence. The words used in Act 1, Scene 4 suggest the natural order which is shortly to be violated. It stresses natural relationships, that is, children, servants, sons, and kinsmen, all these are within quotes, honourable bonds and the political order, liege, thanes, service, duty, loyalty, throne, state, honour, and the human. Love is linked to the natural order of organic growth by images of husbandry. Thus the play is full of suggestions and evocative power. Its profound meaning is conveyed through its language and images. Page 53. Meterlink, Meterlink. Meterlink speaks of the way in which the, quote, essence of the dramatic poet's art consists in speaking through the mouth of his character without appearing to do so, unquote. And he declares that, quote, the mode of life in which the protagonists of Macbeth, unquote, are steeped penetrates and pervades their voices so clearly, animates and saturates their words to such a degree that we see it much better, more intimately, and more immediately than if they took the trouble to describe it to us. Ellipsis. And if the spoken words touch us more deeply than those of any other poet, it is because they are supported by, quote, a great host of hidden powers, unquote. According to this estimate of the play, characters are subordinated to the poetry. Abercrombie speaks of the poetic imagination of Macbeth. He quotes Macbeth's words in the last act when he hears of his wife's death and comments, quote, we see not only what he feels, but the personality that feels it. And in the very act of proclaiming that life is a tale told by an idiot, signifying nothing personal, life announces its virtue. and superbly signifies itself." Unquote. Kenneth Muir, Muir, in the Arden edition, points out the fallacy of Abercrombie's view. He is confusing the powers of expression possessed by Macbeth with the poetic powers of Shakespeare himself. Macbeth is not a poet, is merely part of a great poet. As a matter of fact, almost all the characters, even minor characters like Ross and the bleeding captain, speak glorious poetry. Indeed, the play reveals Shakespeare as a poet. The poetry of the play consists in the enchantment of atmosphere, the mystery of the supernatural, and the beauty of its style. Macbeth's speeches are glorious poetry. Tomorrow and Tomorrow Soliloquy shows the height and depth of poetic conception and utterance. The lines in his first soliloquy, quote, "And pity like a naked newborn babe, striding the blast o' heaven's cherubim horsed, upon the sightless couriers of the air, shall blow the horrid deed in every eye, that tears shall drown the wind," unquote, testify to the complexity and intensity of poetic imagery used to express the moral isolation of Macbeth. Lines like, quote, "My way of life is fallen into the sere, the yellow leaf," unquote, or, quote, "There was a time when my senses would have cooled," unquote, or, quote, "Duncan is in his grave, full stop, after life's fitful fever, / he sleeps well," unquote, are eloquent with poetry and passion. That great poetry is, quote, simple, excuse me, that great poetry is, quote, simple, sensuous, and passionate, is evidenced in these simple but emotion-packed lines. Dover Wilson, in reply to Bradley's view that Macbeth shows no sign of any unusual sensitiveness to the beauty or glory in the world or in the soul, unquote, gives a number of passages to show the great poetry in Macbeth. Quote, "Scarf up the tender eye of pitiful day," unquote, is a distillation of all that Blake wrote of innocence and experience. Quote, "Ere the bat hath flown his cloistered flight, ere to black Hecate's summons, she, shard-brown beetle with his drowsy hum," ellipsis, unquote, read like a passage from some lost masterpiece of Collins. Quote, "This my hand will rather the multitudinous seas incarnadine make the green one red," unquote, offer an angle view of the whole ocean-girdled globe which outsoars even Milton, towering in his pride of place, while, quote, "but here on the bank and shoal of time," unquote, extend the horizon across the vastly deep of eternity.